So Theory has been one of the best players competitively in Stormgate for quite a while. He's won 4 of the internal tournaments that Attico has been putting on. He's placing highly in like every single other one. He's very, very good. He's got an excellent understanding of how Stormgate plays. And on the other hand, we got this player Highdra, who is a very good StarCraft player. He's a semi-pro there, but pretty much every single RTS he gets his hands on, very quickly, he's in the budding ones. He's like one of the top 10 players, one of the top 5 players. In Gates of Pyre, he's like number 1. In other games, I think he also did very well. So to see him here in a qualifying match is also, again, this is going to be a good matchup. And for now, we're just going to see the rush down the middle. It's going to be Gaunt's, or excuse me, it's going to be Imps running forward, towers going down. And I guess my question, as we're seeing double Imp, so is this going to be the double tower? No, is this going to be the double tower rush from both sides now?
I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? It seems like instead of people considering the risk that this could happen, it's almost turned more into like, I just know I can do it better than you, so I don't care. And now we've gone, first we had 2 towers, then we had the 2 versus 1, now we've got a 2v2. Honestly, how many more, like, let's just say cumulative, like, thousands of games played on the ladder do we need before we evolve to the point where everyone just sends all their imps at the start and we like 3 tower rush? Do you think we get there one day?
I mean, I think eventually, maybe. It's one of those, it's kind of interesting, right? So the way a lot of RTS builds generally work, Nate, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to play a very aggressive opening. And then I'm going to start to see how greedy I can be. And then maybe I'm going to build 1 less production structure and still try to make the rush happen. I can go 2 less production structures. I can get my natural a little bit faster, whatever it is. And generally it's kind of like pulling back on the aggression to try to be less, like to be more greedy while still getting a similar result. And in this case, no, it's actually, we're going to be greedier to find that, as we're not going to see the split there from Theory pretty early. So a bit of a mistake there, as he will have a Gaunt get spawned. And at the end of the day, the towers aren't doing anything to the camps. The towers are just killing each other. And okay, so Highdra stays alive.
Does he have enough on this to get the mileage out of it? He's kind of just playing for the position on the leash range, right, for them to go back. So even with that tower very low, and that does motivate Theory to send a brute to the top side. So he shuts that down. He tries to make it a little bit tougher, but it's worth pointing out that he lost the Gaunts, as you mentioned earlier. So and of course without the split, just doesn't really have quite as much. So at the end of the day, we see Highdra as the player that secures that speed camp, which usually leads to them getting more camps. And he sees the conclave out here, excuse me, the Iron Vault. So he has the potential to shut down the exposed production very early too. This puts a lot of pressure onto Theory.
Oh, Nate, look at what Theory's doing though. He's attacking his own conclave, and you might say, why the hell would you do that? Well, it's very simple. They still splash. So he got a ton of damage on his enemy Gaunts very quickly on. Has to split that brute. It's going to go down very, very low. And there we go. He gets the split off at the end. Gaunts are falling down on both sides. But importantly, he gets most of the trade. And there we go. There's the injection as well. So we're going to see one more brute out of this. And it was an interesting idea, right? Like, this felt somewhat holdable. And actually, it's starting to feel very holdable. At the end of the day, Gaunts are starting to fall, but more Gaunts are starting to rally across. We're going to have to see the split go out. And I think the Vault's just dead at this point. I don't really think that Theory is going to be able to hold on to this forward position for really that much longer, or really any time at all.
This is the super awkward side of the camp-centric meta with culling all of the fiends, is that so many of these games we have the early production in this very exposed spot, and it just turns into chaos from the moment that they try to take the camp. The fight begins, and we've essentially had a battle going on the whole entire game that has just not stopped at any point. So he's continuing to try to kite the fiend out of the Iron Vault. He's trying to make use of his charges. It's not like he can just build them in his own base, so getting anything home to have any defense for a follow-up becomes progressively even that much more difficult. So we just see units continuing to rally across the mini-map for Highdra, and Theory is gonna need to make a little bit of magic happen trying to kite against this, but losing another Gaunt and 2, that is gonna do it for him. So GG is called. Highdra is gonna take this game.
Yeah, you know, honestly, I think spending the charges on the on the Vault instead of the Conclave was a pretty significant mistake. Brutes cost 150 or 150 Luminite time after time. To spend all 3 charges that you got there on the Animus spell, it's 450 Luminite, right? That is very, very expensive. Meanwhile, they're not nearly as impactful in the fights. They don't get on top of Gaunts very easily. They don't find any sort of value there. So what you're really looking for is if you're gonna spend your animus on anything, spend it on the Conclave. Get those 3 Gaunts out very quickly because again, they're much cheaper. They provide a lot more value in the fights and they can allow you to maybe snowball that one back. But I understand why Theory won it. He's like, look, my Conclave is back at my main base. The fight is here. I need something to swing this around right now. But again, unfortunately, brutes, they're good to tank, but they don't actually swing the fight for you.
Yeah, it's another demonstration, I think, of the interesting kind of environment that you have with a very early version of a game, and the creep mechanic, and especially on that specific map with the siege camp, of course, being such a focus that you feel like if you don't win that first camp battle, then you can't contest the siege camps, and if you can't contest the siege camps, then you're gonna die. So both players are just completely committed the whole way through because there really is no option aside from that. So I think that's a very specific situation, of course, that we see more so on that map. But Infernal versus Infernal is just so camp focused. I'm sure that because of these guys being so high level, we'll continue to have some very aggressive early games out of them.
Yeah, we will. But you know what, Nate? I am really excited about this second map that we're going to get into very quickly. It's Secluded Grove, and that tech we're talking about, where you can take both speed camps at the same time. That is something I spent like an hour talking to Theory about it last night. He is, I don't know if anyone else is aware of this, but he is absolutely aware what you can do. We talked about it. He knows the exact positionings. He knows how to make it happen. So I'm not guaranteeing that's going to happen. He might feel like it's a little bit too vulnerable. I don't know. But keep your eye out for that one, because if you can run across the map with 10 themes against your opponent's 5, it speeds up your clears everywhere else. It's a really powerful idea. But again, the question is, sure, it's powerful, but I don't know if he's going to do it yet.
Yeah, I wonder when we get to the eventual point where you have like the counter meta, because right now it is all about, you know, scooping up those fiends. What are the other plays, and perhaps we've just got very simple tools that we're working with at the moment, so we won't see it diverge too much from this. But you were mentioning this type of tech earlier, and we see it here. But the single gaunt for taking the speed camp, you have this leash point where they will come out and won't really engage you any further. So it's just a little bit of tappy toes back and forth. Instead, however, on the other side, we have Theory just with that very fast shrine in the natural.
Yeah, that is actually really greedy. And man, Theory, I guess practice, I don't know. So the spot is, if you're looking for, you see the 2 kind of thorns coming out of the right side of the grass, I guess. You want to put your gaunt like right between them and just hold position. And you can just leave it alone. The goats will never touch you. You're going to be able to make it go backwards and forth. And you can send your second gaunt over to the left side and do the same thing. Now, clearly didn't go for it. That's totally fine. He does get the 5 fiends anyways. And what do we see on our clear on the bottom side? Is these fiends are going to... Actually, it's actually really important what they're doing. They're knocking down the therium mining. And again, the most important thing that we have to talk about when we talk about this game of Stormgate, it's about the therium mining early, because that gives you your gaunts. That gives you that ability to continuously reinforce. That gives you this ability to go and get more fiends. As actually, Theory here Highdra here making a couple of mistakes. And I'm sorry, you know, I'm sitting here and thinking Theory was on the north side. Theory actually did go for the double take. He's gotten both speed camps at the same time. So he is actually using that. The conversations worked out, Nate. That makes me very happy.
You love to see it. You love to see it. It is such an interesting map in that you have the objectives that are going to give you like the combat abilities, getting the speed, getting the healing. You get the vision in the middle, but the resources and the movement, those are very nice things to have, especially as you continue to get around the map, continue to prance around. So vision camp going to be taken on the south side, and it looks like we're going to thankfully get a little bit closer to that macro kind of situation that we were discussing. The games do generally play out very differently when you're not on Jagged Maw. So let's just keep things rolling along here. I've been liking what we've been seeing so far, and with the conversations about particularly these 2 players being near the top of those who have been playing in this qualifier, it makes me excited to see what happens if they can push each other to the limit and one of them doesn't break too quickly.
I really like what I'm seeing in Theory this game. Yeah, you know what? Jagged Maw in the mirror it's kind of silly, right? It's like, oh, we're gonna tower rush, and one of us is gonna have the gaunts maybe aggro onto our tower, or the goats aggro onto our tower, and it gets a little awkward, right? It's like, okay, well, at that point, I've lost the most important camp on the map, and that enables the catapult, and it gets weird. But in this game, Theory's gotten his natural much faster. He's gotten all the camps that he wants, and now he's actively stealing all the resource camps on the map. Notice he sent Fiends bottom side and top side, so every single resource camp is now in the hands of Theory. And yeah, that's only about, like, what is that, 80 Luminite, but it's actually 160 Luminite, because you get your 80, your opponent gets 0. So it's that significant swing right there, which should enable maybe a quicker third shrine, or as Theory likes to do, a quicker natural shrine. Notice there, he's got a shrine right next to the Therium, really minimizing that travel distance from the Therium patch over to your shrine, so you make more, and also making the spread of Therium get a little bit closer, which is also beneficial because it means your imps don't have to travel as far away, which means, again, you're going to mine just a little bit more efficiently. And given the economic developments, given how many camps that Theory was able to hoover up off the map early on, it's absolutely worth doing. But we do have to worry because there's a Doombringer coming in from Highdra onto the other side. It's got, what is that, 4 Gaunts, 2 Brutes, something like that, as he's going to try to go and get damage early. And Nate, the final thought, as we see this thing go in, you might say, well, why not just 8 Gaunts? Well, first of all, you don't have the production for it. Second of all, 2 Brutes, they pretty much one-shot imps. So by adding those 2 Brutes on top of things, you add a lot more burst damage, which speeds up the Fiend conversion rate, which then gives you that almost insurmountable snowball if the drop is not handled quickly enough.
Yeah, and he comes up, he shows it, sees the shroud stones near the Therium deposit, so it doesn't feel super comfortable trying to push it in. It's important to keep in mind he can only load back into that Doombringer when it's on the ground. So if he gives the Gaunts a couple of seconds to get a couple of volleys in on that, the last thing that you want to do is be trying to get back up into the air and then getting popped off of any of that residual leftover damage from the infest. So Theory manages to hold that off without too much struggle. We see the third shrine going up for Highdra on the north side, and I loved you pointing that out, by the way. Just building the shrine, because they don't have the Therium harvester that the Vanguard have, you put your shrine next to the Therium, but he waited with the rocks opening it so we could have it in that spot. We did have the Doombringer swing around the corner back to the Luminite brick though in the main, so denies a little bit of the mining there, but otherwise not getting that snowball effect like you're talking about, using the brutes to help execute the imps once they get that infestation on them.
Yeah, the trick though is this is going to force a lot of Gaunts to stay back at home. This is going to really force Therian to play a little bit more defensively. So the drop's going to go down once again. And remember, imps don't heal particularly well. It's going to take a little while. So getting a little damage over time, and over time means the next drop's going to be a little bit more effective. And the next drop is going to be a little bit more effective. And it goes and it goes and it goes. And while we talked about Theory had that much quicker natural, that much quicker Therium extra shrine as well, and we're now seeing, of course, Shadow Clef's down, upgrades on the way, so you can start to get the trample coming in from the Magmadons. His third base is significantly slower. Now, finally, he's going to find some damage here. Not all the imps are going to get pulled away, but there's a counter Doombringer, and here's where it gets a little... No, I'm sorry, that's white health. That's not cargo. I lied. But the Doombringer's out now. 8 Gaunts are going to show up into this. It gets me every time, Nate. I'm like, I need to be really afraid of this, and then there's nothing in it. Well, okay. We're fine.
Yeah,
we're okay.
It's new types of mechanics, right? It's not shields. It's white health. It's something. So they're trying to catch him, and this is where the micro with the Doombringer is so awkward, because you would think, oh yeah, it's the air unit. He should be able to just chase the other ship, but you have that cliff along the edge of the map, and for the Doombringer to unload, it has to go down. So you end up doing a little bit of little Viking jumping jacks, almost feels like, from StarCraft. You're like, okay, I can't attack him without going down, but the moment that I go down, he can just run away. So it's a nice game of Doombringer chicken, let's say, as he cleans up the goats on the northeast side.
Yeah, so and we talked about this earlier on. Clearing the first round of camps is very important, right? Because that gives you power into your expansion, that gives you a decent amount of money. But clearing level 2 camps is arguably even more important, because they're worth more money here now. Well, drop tries to snipe things down, but you gotta be very careful right now. That's the other one. This is dead. This Doombringer is so dead that even if it gets, it's not getting out. It's totally gone. The infest is on top of it, and that is such a power spike for Theory in this game.
Huge.
Now I don't know if he's gonna go attack with it, right? Because hey, conveniently, Nate, where is he?
Oh, he just happens to be right next to the double base. You've got 2 Therium deposits, you've got 2 Luminite deposits. You only need one shrine to take it all. It's you call it the cash money base, all right? It's the ATM over here of Secluded Grove. He is opening the trees up on the other side because we have Magmadons now coming into it, and the Magmadon, big crucial unit for these situations. You have that stomp, can push units away, kind of block pathing, create a little bit of space, and then of course there's the upgrade that gives it the stun. So the usage of that ability becomes huge, going for the infest, and has the Doombringer dropping on the top side to get the rest of the Gaunt reinforcements, almost creating a surround naturally on this, but that's still a lot of Magmadons to try to push through Behemoth.
That was a horrible fight for Theory. I understand the idea. He got the flanks set up really nicely, but he did not have the Magmadon count, and he was not set up properly. His Gaunts were there. They were sitting there. They were exposed for Highdra to get right on top of him. It seems like he's got it. No, he does not have a Magmadon.
Oof. That's a lot of stomps. That's a lot of stomps.
I watch these Magmadons, stomp around, and I'm just reminded of like the typical New Yorker from Seinfeld, just they're going for it. I'm walking here, and then they stomp everything down, and the taxi cab gets run into, and it gets rather unfortunate if you're on the downside of that one.
It's such a funny unit to watch, and the way that it acts is so cool. You're like, oh, we have these destructible terrain mechanics. Well, of course it makes sense that you could blow it up or something, but that you just have a unit with that thrash ability, and now the quote unquote island base becomes another pathway through the center. Here we have Highdra pushing on the south side, Shrine, Gaunts bouncing the attacks off onto the minions from the Shrine, blocking a bit of space. Look at that, just sends one of the Magmadons through to stomp, just to block the pathing, and then tries to rotate out and get the other one over there. There is the Super Shroud Stone going to be called in to try and help this down. At the same time, he was trying to stomp the imp line on the bottom to get them all into Fiends, so whether he can crush him here or not is a big question, but that base and the economy is going to get traded out no matter what.
And it will now. A couple Gaunts are able to hide behind the Magmadons, which is really, really nice. And also notice there are no Fiends available. Not really for Theory, so he can't go and refill the white health. All of the imps are going to fall down. And it's wild to me as I look at this fight. I look at the last fight as well, just how many more Magmadon Hydra's been able to get. Because again, remember, Theory was quicker to the natural Therium. He was quicker to the Shrine on the natural Therium. He sniped the Doombringer that his opponent didn't have, and he still had his own, so that's 150 Therium that you might have to remake. And despite that, the army of Highdra was just significantly higher quality, and the composition was just that much better when he took the fight. And that meant that at this point, there's not a lot for Theory to do. I've been hyping him up as this very good player, and absolutely he is. But he's kind of dead in this game at this point. His third base is going to fall down.
He played for some cool positioning. I think we've seen, though, this has been the trend, right, with the players that have been able to kind of win the early engagements, that are willing to take those bold aggressive moves forward at the start. We've just seen it. They go into that next game, and it kind of stays the same. We've seen the player on the losing side be more defensive, be a little more concerned about maybe an attack coming in or losing that early skirmish. And the moment that you give up a single inch in that Infernal versus Infernal, it feels like it turns into a mile very fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I think if Theory had just kind of backed up for a second and gotten more Magmadons out, acknowledged that, hey, I've got a macro lead here. My natural is in a good spot. I got Therium faster. My third base was not that much further behind, if just similarly timed. And I got your Doombringer. So I have all the pressure on the map that I could possibly want. Back up a little bit. Take an extra base. Maybe start to contest the center. But instead, he runs forward, and all of his Gaunts get caught out by like two Magmadons. It's like, well, at that point, you don't have the infest pressure. You don't have this ability to kite around and establish the concave. It's all about your Magmadons. And well, you've spent a lot of your Therium on Gaunts. That's not Magmadons. You did not have as many of them, and well, the game swings very quickly.
That's like the contrast of when you think about like where some of the players come from game wise too, where in a game like StarCraft, pulling off levels of micro where you're trying to use like that Doombringer, for example, where he gets the drop with the Gaunts, is able to land the snipe, like that can be such a game turning huge thing. But in Stormgate, for this matchup, you still have other techs that you're progressing towards at the same time. And it feels like, at least for now, one of the biggest deciding factors is the usage and, of course, the numbers of those Magmadons. Just because they tank so well, they're kind of like the counter to the spreading of that infest. And I feel like the way that he used them, the way Highdra used them, sending them into the choke points where his army was going through the Therium patch, that just demonstrates like a really good understanding. You don't want to send them all because
Mhm.
you do have a cooldown on that ability, but kind of drip feeding it in where I'm going to go one in and his whole army's going to get choked up and then just send one more right at the end and you're just stuck. You're just completely stuck. It's really heads up play and demonstrates an early mastery, shall we say, of one of the more interesting units for the Infernal faction.